reporting on today's event. And we're delighted to be working with the Chamber's strategic partner, the Royal Borough of Greenwich. I think that's enough for me, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Denise Scott MacDonald, who's the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Economy and Skills. Over to you, Denise.
Thank you, Helen. Hello, everyone. I too recognise the number of faces, and it's good to see you all. I don't know about you, but just under a year ago, when the pandemic was announced, and I don't know about you, but when I walked the high streets and I saw so many shops closed, it kind of sent shivers down my bones, thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? And then the pandemic first wave came to an end, and I thought, you know what? We're going to get back to normal as quickly as possible. There was eat out to buy out and everything. And then very quickly, things changed back again, and we're all back in this same situation. So I'm longing for it. I'm hopefully, with the vaccination rolling out, I'm really, really hopeful that things will change and we can get back to business. But this session today is really, really, really important. I hope you enjoy this session. I hope you get a lot out of it. We're here because we've got a range of business grants and supports that are available to local business, and we want to help you apply for those funds. In the last 5 months, the government has allocated over £29 million to our borough that we have to distribute, and we have been distributing across Greenwich. And there has been a slower than expected take up in funding. Now, this has not just been happening here in Greenwich, but across the country. This has been the same story over and over and over about the funding and about the business grants. But in Greenwich, over the last 2 weeks, we have seen a slight uptake in the number of applications. A momentum is building, and we have seen a significant increase in applications and payments going out to business. Today, a total of over 5,400 business grants have been paid out across the borough with a total value of £11.6 million. However, this leaves another £17.5 million for us to give out and to be awarded. I and my council colleagues, and they're on this call right now, are keen to ensure that the balance of funding is awarded to business that have lost income due to the pandemic. We want to ensure that we take all the reasonable steps to encourage business to apply for the funding that is in place to support them. And when the economy recovers, and hopefully that will be soon, and what we hope is not too distant future, we want to avoid having to actually give back any of that money. And that's one thing that's really on my heart, is that we don't have to give any of this money back, because we want to give it out to you guys and everybody in the Greenwich community that operates as a business. I'm aware that a key reason why businesses are not applying for support is because they are confused by the wide range of grants that have been launched for the various local and national restriction regime that has been in place since last August. And that's fine. That's fine if you're confused, because sometimes last week I was at a meeting where I had to report on the business grants, and there's so many different types of funding pots for if you're open or you're closed, or if you're open but you're significantly impacted. It can get quite confusing, and I'm sure the team will explain more as we go through. The council is now managing 7 different government grants scheme for businesses, and I do appreciate how confusing it must be. Therefore, I'm pleased our colleagues from the council's business rates team and business and the town centre team are here today to help explain the programme and how to apply for the support. At the end of this session, I would like to get some feedback from you on the form of support your business sector will need to help you or your sector to reopen and recover from the impact of the pandemic. And this is where it's really important for us to hear from you and what you think we need to do more of, or if you've got something particular about your sector or your type of business, we want to hear about it and hear what we can do to make it better for you. But I'm going to hand over back to Helen. Hopefully you enjoy it and you get a lot out of this session, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Denise. Here we go, and we have this here in front of us. So I'm going to hand over now to Kingsley Otobushin, who's Head of Business and Town Centre, and Kingsley is going to give us a very interesting presentation. Over to you, Kingsley.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Councillor Denise Scott MacDonald. as Councillor Scott MacDonald said, that there are a wide range of schemes with some complex rules about eligibility, state aid, various grant levels, and various grant lockdown periods. The main purpose of today's meeting is to help decipher these rules and to focus on the main issues that business needs to think about, and that is eligibility. What are the eligibility requirements? How do you qualify for these grants? And the application process. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end, so please bear that in mind, and we'll go through the grant programs. And if you do have any questions, please say those to the end. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay.
Okay, so the Royal Borough of Greenwich is being given £29 million of grants to administer by central government. Those schemes are funded via the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, known as BES. And now there are 7 different grant regimes for businesses. And the reason why, I think this is a natural process. No one would choose to have 7 different grant regimes to manage. These regimes have basically evolved as a result of the various lockdowns that we've had in place since last summer. As you might all recall, last summer we had the easing of the lockdown restrictions, the reopening of the high streets, Eat Out to Help Out. We had very low transmission rates, and we were all reassured that this will all be over by Christmas and we'll be back to our normal lives. And we tried to do that, and the local authority supported that. But as the transmission rates increased, we had the introduction of the various tiered restriction structures. So we've had the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and now we've got a national lockdown. And the grant levels basically reflect the amount of grant that's eligible for each of those lockdown restrictions. And as those lockdown restrictions have rolled out across the country, they basically result in a different grant level for that part of the country. So therefore, we now have a situation where we have a very sort of complex web of grant regimes that have been rolled out by the country. And what probably makes life a bit more complicated for businesses is that those regimes vary. How those regimes are managed vary according to which local authority you're in. So that adds another level of complication and confusion for businesses. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide just sort of gives you an overview of the 7 schemes, and I won't go through them all in detail, but you've got the first scheme you can see on the slide is basically what we call the Local Restriction Support Grant. In essence, that is funding for businesses that were required to close. They're businesses that are selling non-essential services, services which require close contact, services which will, in essence, lead to the transmission. So that's the Local Restriction Support Grant Scheme. The second scheme below that is it's called a sector scheme. That is for nightclubs, dance halls, businesses that provide entertainment. Again, they got a specific grant, and that was eligible. They're eligible from the 23rd of March. Next scheme is a Christian Support Payment Scheme. That was for wet-led pubs. That's to reflect the lockdown that was implemented just before Christmas. And then you've got the closed lockdown payment scheme. Again, that was rolled out just before Christmas as well. Next slide, please. So this slide basically, again, sort of goes through the top scheme that's called the Local Restrictions Grant Open Scheme. These are for businesses in the hospitality sector who are affected by the Tier 2 restrictions that were in place from the 17th of October to the 4th of November. And then the next 2 schemes are the schemes where the local authorities have a bit more discretion. And they're primarily for businesses that aren't on the business rates list. So they're the Additional Restrictions Grant Scheme. And then at the beginning of the year, we had a top up to that scheme that was announced by the central government. I will sort of go into a bit more detail about these schemes later on in the presentation. Okay, next slide, please. So key thing to bear in mind is that Greenwich has a very generous scheme, very flexible, but there are a number of exclusions that you need to bear in mind. So the first exclusion is that if a business is able to continue to trade and to operate their services remotely, like a lot of office-based businesses, they are not eligible. So that's a key consideration to bear in mind. Businesses that have chosen to close but not required to will also not be eligible as well. So if a business for one reason or another has decided that it's not worth trading, then we can't really fund them because we have to demonstrate we're supporting a going concern. The next level is for the next exclusion relates to businesses who would be over the state aid limits. It's called the de minimis limits. This doesn't apply to most businesses in the borough because to exceed that limit, there's a temporary framework which requires you to receive over £800,000 in grant support. I don't think there's any business in Greenwich that has received more than £800,000. If there are, can you please let me know because we need our money back. Okay. So the local authority has been asked to administer 7 schemes altogether, and to sort of make things easy, there's sort of 2 main categories of schemes. You've got schemes which relate to businesses who pay business rates, and they're businesses that are required to close under the various restrictions, the tier 3, tier 4, and even the tier 2, and the national lockdown restrictions. So if you, these grants can only be paid to businesses that pay business rates to the Royal Borough of Greenwich. So again, if you're out of the borough, you have to apply for a grant from your borough. But you have to be on the ratings list to apply for these schemes. And you don't actually need to do anything. You would have been contacted by the council's business rates team because they obviously have a database of all their ratepayers. They would have identified all the businesses that were impacted by the national restrictions. You'd have received a letter with a link for submitting your application, and you can then validate your application, and you are normally paid within within 1 working day, and the applications are made online. Next slide, please. So next slide, please, Sandra. Can you hear me? Thanks. So I deliberately haven't gone into details about the various grant payments, but they are available on the website. But so you'll see that on the slide as well. But as I said earlier on, grants are paid generally within 24 hours. And if you are a business rates payer and you haven't received your letter, or you haven't, or you believe you've been missed out, please contact the business rates team at business-rates@royalgreenwich.gov.uk to indicate that you believe you are eligible, and they'll follow up with you. These schemes are managed in line with very strict government criteria, so there's very little discretion from the business rates team as to whether you're eligible. So if you are rejected, it is because they are implementing the guidance specified by central government. But if you do believe you are eligible, please email the business rates team and they will investigate further. Okay, next slide, please. So the next sort of tranche of funding we have relates to organisations who are eligible for what we call the Additional Restrictions Grant Scheme, which I call ARG. The ARG scheme has been allocated, the funding has been allocated to local authorities, and local authorities have a considerable amount of discretion as to how they choose to administer this scheme. And in Greenwich, as I said earlier on, we do have a very generous scheme that's fairly straightforward for business to apply. And the two key things you need to bear in mind if you want to apply for Additional Restrictions Grant Scheme is that it's for businesses who are not on the business ratings list. So we have a number of businesses who would have been required to close, but for one reason or another, they are subletting their property, usually because they're subletting the property or their shared workspace, and therefore they would not have got a letter from the business rates team. So our ARG scheme basically funds you on the same basis as the schemes managed by business rates, and you are eligible for support from ARG. So if you're not on the ratings list, we do have a program for you. The second criteria, so if you're not on the ratings list, you're eligible for funding. But the Greenwich scheme also has funding for businesses who are on the ratings list, and have not been forced to close. So if you are on the ratings list and have not been forced to close, you are also eligible for support from the ARG scheme. But the key thing is you have to demonstrate you have been impacted by the restrictions required by central government. So this funding, it typically applies to businesses who supply to the hospitality and leisure sector, or supply to the personal care sector or the event sector. So you've got people like photographers, food manufacturers, set designers. We have fund taxi drivers, dry cleaners for who do dry clean and repairs of costumes. We've given out a large number of grants to businesses like that who have not been required to close. They're not on the government's list of business required to close, but they can demonstrate through their accounts and through their personal statements that because they're a supplier to sectors that have been required to close, that they have experienced a loss of income and therefore they are eligible for support. And so we've got funding. If you submit your application, we will fund you according to either the rent that you pay or your rateable value if you are on the ratings list. We'll basically give you two payments to reflect the first two lockdown periods. You'll also get a top-up payment, which is announced by central government. So it could be up to about £15,000 altogether that you could qualify for as a local business under the ARG scheme. I won't go into the various iterations about the various grant levels. They are available on the application form. There is a link included in the presentation. But again, if you want to go into detail on that in the Q&A session, please do so. Okay, next slide, please. So I believe we have a testimonial from the Chamber of Commerce from Ralph Gallo. Helen, are you covering this or shall I cover this?
No, I'm going to do this on behalf of Ralph because as I say, the Chamber's office, we're based at Thameside Studios in Woolwich, and Ralph Gallo's day job is he's the Greenwich branch manager of Handelsbanken, and that's why he's busy doing his banking stuff this afternoon, which is why, and he's asked me personally to read his testimonial, and it's absolutely true, this. So here we go. I'd received links from the Royal Borough of Greenwich regarding possible grants for the Chamber of Commerce. We will be eligible from view of the ongoing business disruption caused by the COVID lockdowns. I was extremely pleased at how quickly it took me to claim the grants in my capacity as FD for the SE London Chamber of Commerce. I logged on last Tuesday evening and at 8 p.m. and within 20 minutes, I'd completed the application form. This included time to download the bank account statements. Now, Ralph's top tips, I would ensure that before applying that you have access to the following items electronically: passport identification for the personnel applying, details of the registered office, company and VAT numbers of the business and entity if it's appropriate, and last 4 months of bank statements in a PDF format. And the other bit is that so the first tranche of money after this magical bit of form filling, the grant monies were received within a couple of days. And Ralph's final comment is, overall, I'm very pleased with the efficiency and turnaround of the application process. So I think he's actually giving it 10 out of 10. Thank you.
Okay. And so I'll just cover that point off. I mean, I think, and this is Ralph speaking on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. So the Chamber of Commerce is a local business. A key source of their income is well, obviously membership subscriptions, but also these wonderful events where which they sell tickets for. So obviously, as a business that can't run events at the moment, they've obviously they've experienced a reduction in their income, and so in many people's minds, they wouldn't have been eligible for support because they're not a pub, they're not a restaurant, but actually they're a business that's in the event sector. And as a result of the restrictions, you can't run big public events. And as a result, the Chamber submitted an application. And as Ralph has said earlier on, that was turned around within 48 hours and they've received their grants. So please, as a business, if you think, if you have been impacted by the restrictions, please submit an application if you're clear. If you're not clear, send us an email. We can either reply to you via email or call you and just talk through your eligibility. But in essence, we do have a very generous scheme in Greenwich. We are looking to support businesses that have been affected by the restrictions. I think we ran a scheme earlier on this summer where we thought we were in a temporary lockdown period, but there's no doubt about it now. We've been in lockdown for well over a year. It's very hard to see how any business or most businesses have been affected by the restrictions. And I think given the generosity of the scheme, most businesses, as long as you're a trading entity and can evidence the impact of the restrictions on your business, we will seek to support you. Next slide. Okay, that's it. So I think we now have a Q&A. Is that right, Helen?
We do. Now, I can't see any questions in the chat as yet. But I'd like to, just to open this up, one of the areas that we're very keen on are people, supplying the hospitality industry. And I'd like just Marco Olmi of Drury Tea and Coffee. Would you like to say a few words?
Hello, you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Hello, Helen. Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes. It's fun at the moment. Even worse than it was in the early part of lockdown. We I think in common with a lot of hospitality supplier businesses, we are suffering enormously. I need to echo Raf's sentiments. I've applied for the grants. It was incredibly easy. Everything's there to help you do it. And for us, I don't think I'm over-egging it by saying that we got a large discretionary grant last summer, and that's possibly made the difference between us surviving or not surviving. It's very close. So at the moment, we're just about keeping our head above water, and any help, any assistance like this is incredibly welcome. So well done to the borough and everybody involved in supporting us in these ways. And hopefully now, I mean, it's not particularly good news for the hospitality sector. We're looking at possibly May, I think is the latest talk in terms of opening up hospitality at the earliest. And with the news about an hour ago of further mutations and impacts, etc., that may be pushed back. So, hopefully this is all going to continue for a little while longer, and in terms of the support, that is, will support us right the way through until our sector opens up and we're hopefully back in a place where we can trade our way out of it and get on with the business of supplying tea and coffee to everybody. But we should see.
Thank you very much, Marco. Now I've got some questions here, and I think this is for Brendan and Kathy, and it's from Mark Johnson Brown. Could you give some scope of the size of grants, please?
Hi everyone. I think it very much depends on the rateable value of your property. But for a tier 3 restriction, the grant for between the 16th and the 19th of December, the amounts vary for the smallest rateable value, so 15,000 under, from £190.57 through to £428.57. For the period between the 20th of December and the 4th of January, the grants vary again from £762 through to £1,700, again with the largest RV attracting the higher amounts. For the period from the 5th of December through to the 16th of February, the grants range from £2,000 to £4,500. And the national lockdown closed business payments, which is a one-off payment, again, the grants vary from £4,000 to £9,000.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I think that's we've covered that. Now I've got a question here from Toyin, listening ears. And what category do charities fall in, please?
Shall I cover that one?
Please.
You can do, Kingsley, if you want. Yeah, okay.
Cool. So as a charity, I think, as I said, the key driver is you won't be on a list of businesses required to close. I suspect that's the case. But you could qualify as an organisation that's been impacted by the restrictions. So you would need to demonstrate how the restrictions have impacted on your operations as a charity. So do you receive donations from a shop? Do you operate events? You need to sort of demonstrate. And if you look at the application form, we ask you to, one, indicate the reduction in income, but provide a personal statement as to how the restrictions have impacted on your business. So we've had various different charities. So we've had charities that have retail units, for example, that sell second-hand clothes. Obviously, they've been required to close or have had experienced a reduction in footfall and sales. So they can qualify for. I think it really does depend on how the restrictions have impacted on your operations as a charity, and what income streams have been affected. But we have funded many charities as a result.
Okay.
Brendan, do you have anything to add? I can see your hand's gone up, Brendan.
Yes, I was just reiterating what Kingsley said. I mean, I think with the charities, there's a difference between, obviously, if it's a back office operation or if it's a charity shop that's open on a high street or a parade or on the road. They'll be classed as non-essential, non-essential retail, and they'll be asked to close the same as everyone else. So they would be applicable, or they would be eligible for the LRSG grant, the closed grant, etc. So it very much depends what the property is being used for. If it's for front-facing, public-facing retail, that's a lot more simpler to award the grant. That's based on the rateable value. If it's a back office that's used for administration, then that may not be entitled to that grant, but may be entitled to a different set of grants.
Mm.
Thank you. I've got a slightly different one here from Karen. And she's asking, what if you're a sole trader working from home providing catering services? We're open, however, there's a big decrease in customers.
Shall I cover that?
Thank you.
Yep. We again, the Greenwich scheme is very generous. We do have a lot of home-based businesses, as well as a lot of businesses renting shared spaces. We have funded applications from caterers. So again, submit your application. All we ask you to do is to demonstrate the impact. We need to be assured, one, that your business is based in the borough, so we need evidence of your address. But two, we need to be assured that you are a going concern. So if it's a business that you set up and hasn't traded for years, then obviously that won't be grant funded, because obviously, to demonstrate an impact of COVID, we need to see a reduction in sales. But if you have been trading and you can demonstrate that actually, you've experienced a drop in income, we will grant funding, and we have funded caterers who have clearly been impacted by the restrictions, who cannot deliver catering to events. And I think, one thing we all coming to realize after a year of this is that how many events we all go to, and that's all died a death over the last year. It's a critical part of our economy. So yeah, if you're a catering business, you can demonstrate that you're a going concern, that you had income and trade before COVID. Yes, please submit your application and we will fund you.
Thank you. I've got another one from M. Mackey here, and they are an entertainment organisation. They tried for various grants, but nothing seems to fit their remit. They're on an online broadcast television channel, but they have received business rate grant of 6,000. Is there anything available for us?
Okay.
Is that you, Kingsley?
Yeah, shall I cover it? If you've already received a grant from the business rates team, probably through the closed program, then you wouldn't be eligible for ARG, because the ARG money is there to fill and meet the gaps left from the core schemes funded via business rates. So if you would receive the grant via business rates, then you wouldn't receive a grant from ARG.
Thank you. I've got one question here. This is an interesting one. And it's from Sarah, who applied for an additional restrictions grant, and she said it was easy, but she hasn't received any payment or feedback. Although according to what she feels has been said today, she should qualify. Is there a phone number or a name to contact at Greenwich?
Best thing
She doesn't
to do,
pay rates or own a business property, but the business has been severely impacted.
Okay, I think the best thing to do is if you send us an email. We are working remotely. There is an officer who does pick up phone calls, but his phone is constantly busy. And so phone calls tend to go to voicemail because he was on the phone. Best thing to do is to send an email to the address business@royalgreenwich.gov.uk mention that you attended this workshop, just to make sure we can pick you out from the hundreds of other emails we get each day. Unfortunately, we are getting hundreds of emails each day, so I do apologize for that. But mention that you attended the workshop, and the whole team received those emails. I will look out for it. If you can do that today, we'll follow up with you. Well, what time is it now? Yep, we'll follow up with you today.
Lovely.
We've got 2.5 hours to get an email to us.
Jolly good, jolly good.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, there's another one from Mariella, who's a bit late in coming, and she's asking about the information to see if her business is eligible. You know, she's a home-based bakery. So could you just give the general email address again, Kingsley?
Sure.
For this sort of thing.
Sure. It's business at Royal Greenwich, or one word, .gov.uk. And again, mention that you attended today's workshop, and we'll look out for it. And I'll advise the team to look out for anyone. If you put Chamber of Commerce workshop in the subject heading, that will help you stick out a little bit, and we'll look out for that.
Lovely, thank you. And I can actually see Graham on my screen next to his questions. So it's Graham Bleasdale from Greenwich Royal Tours, and it's an interesting one about the criteria. The ARG's range, you know, is £934 to £15,000. Graham's question is, what are they based on? What's the criteria?
The grant levels basically mirror the grant levels used by the for the business rates-based scheme. So what we don't want is a situation where you've got a discrepancy between the amount of money you get, whether you're on the ratings list or not on the ratings list. So we have mirrored the grant levels used by the business rates team. So that's the rationale behind those grant levels. Have I understood your question properly?
Yeah, but rather than grant levels, it's actually your rent levels. So if you just sort of remove the word grant, rates, and replace that with rents, that effectively is the same, you know, the levels of funding that you'll be awarded if you're eligible.
Lovely.
That's right.
Thank you.
That's great.
Lovely. I've got one from Sarah Battingston. And she thinks her business receives business rates relief and has been partially impacted by COVID. And they're not able to do any face-to-face activities such as teaching, which represented 40 to 50% of the usual income. They work in the fashion teaching industry. We therefore only partially stayed open. What are we eligible for? Kingsley?
Should I cover that?
Please?
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
If you haven't received a letter from the business rates team as a business that's required to close, and you don't fall into the definition of central government around a business that's required to close, then you would be eligible under the Greenwich regime for ARG funding. So I'd invite you to submit an application for ARG funding, identify how your business has been impacted, and you've sort of covered that point in today's session. Provide evidence of the loss of income, and again, you will be supported.
Okay, thank you very much. And I've got one from Becky Dell here. They run a music school, mostly do home lessons in the local Greenwich and Blackheath area, have a studio and offices at Mycenae House. They've been going for 9 years, and prior to COVID were profitable. We've kept going during COVID with about 60 to 70% of students switching to online lessons, but have still had a big decrease in lesson student numbers due to some kids not wanting Zoom lessons. She assumed we wouldn't be able to apply for this as we've been kept going, but maybe we can. Please, could you advise, Kingsley?
Yep, we've funded similar businesses to yours. I've got a son who was doing wonderfully at cello, but as soon as it switched to Zoom, he lost interest. So we have had to cancel those lessons. So yeah, we appreciate the situation of music teachers. Obviously, that's face to face. It's high risk, transmission risk. We have funded music teachers, so please submit your application.
Thank you. And I've got to feel, I might be wrong, but I think Mark Johnson Brown is at Mycenae House. I might be wrong. We've got a question from Mark. They were closed for the first 6 months and gratefully received some support. However, we partially reopened to allow an associate organisation to reopen their preschool nursery. This means we're losing much more money, zero income, and yet we have become ineligible for funding. Is there any way round this, as it comes at a time when our reserves are running out? Kingsley.
Okay, yeah, similarly, if you can basically submit your application, identify what income streams have been affected by government restrictions, provide copies of your bank statements, provide a personal statement. We will look into that. As I said before, we do have a generous scheme in Greenwich, and we've had similar organisations that have been supported by us. We will continue to support you as long as we have the money available. So, you know, the key thing for any of you is to get your application in, and, you know, we'll consider that favourably.
Thank you. And I have one here from Nick. How does the assistance for taxi drivers operate?
Shall I cover that?
Please.
Yep. So again, taxi drivers, as long as you're based in the Borough of Greenwich, so we have had communication with the various unions that represent taxi drivers. They've experienced a reduction of income. They are home-based businesses. A lot of them have fixed ongoing costs relating to their taxis, and it's not too cheap either. There's been a reduction in footfall, reduction in passenger traffic, people coming off train stations. They have very clearly experienced a loss of income, and we have funded taxi drivers. So again, please submit your application. Key things to make sure that you're a going concern, you live in the borough, you have bank statements to support your case, provide a supporting statement, and we'll look at that favourably.
That's lovely, and I think this is the same thing, isn't it? The rough, you know, when I gave rough words 20 minutes to do the form. Now we have a question here from Paul Russell Associates, who are an architectural practice and have had 2 projects put on hold. One is to a very large pub function venue, and the other was for flats above a large restaurant, which is now on hold because nobody's interested in the restaurant. This large project would have been 1/4 of our annual turnover. Are we eligible?
Oof, that's a more difficult one. So I think what we need to do is have a conversation here, because obviously those projects are going to go ahead, but the timings change. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's what Paul's saying, and I don't think we're putting you on. Shall I get you, connect you two?
Yeah.
You know, after the meeting.
Yeah. Key thing, Paul, is that obviously we do have to account for these funds to central government, and we need to make sure that when we are paying the grants that we have enough information to justify that grant. So your inquiries is slightly different, but we need to make sure if we were to support an application that you know, we can ask support to that to central government. So yeah, let's have a conversation and look at the detail and see whether we can make a case for funding.
That's excellent, Kingsley. And we're getting I'm seeing a lot of emails of thank you. So I think you better tell your colleagues, because I think that email address will be busy this afternoon. Here's one from Annette Almercado. And it's saying, if you've got a business, e.g. a salon, but you also sell hair products, and the salon is obviously closed, but you can still sell products online, would you qualify for any support?
Do you want to cover that, Brendan and Kathy?
Yeah, I don't mind covering that.
Yeah,
I think the answer is yes, because it's your core business is a hair salon. So providing you can demonstrate in your personal statement that you're impacted and you've seen a shortfall in your sales, then you can qualify under the ARG scheme if you're in a non-business rated premises.
Yes, if you're not, yeah. So I assume if you are a hair salon, you'd have been required to close. So you would have received a letter from the business rates team. But as Michelle said, if you're not on the ratings list because of the you're not the rate payer, then maybe you wouldn't have got the letter. Then we could have a look at that and see whether we can fund you through ARG. But if you are a salon, you should be on the ratings list, and therefore you would have received a letter from the business rates team.
And it's a similar situation to restaurants. So although restaurants are able to provide a takeaway service, obviously their core business is, seated dining. So therefore their core business has been impacted.
That's right.
And therefore they qualify for additional support through the ARG because they've seen a significant impact on their income.
Thank you. And I've just seen actually there.
Sorry, Brendan, you're going to prove me wrong now.
Sorry.
Sorry, can I just another message?
Oh yes, sorry, Brendan.
I beg your pardon. Similar to what Kingsley was saying earlier, just a message to Annette there. I'm not sure from that message. It sounds as if she hasn't applied for one of the grants. If she could send an email to Kingsley as well on that email address, and perhaps Kingsley or his colleagues could pass it on to us, because as a hairdressing salon, obviously they would be eligible for the clothes grant, as Michelle said.
Yeah.
Lovely. We have one call from new user who's literally, I can see on the screen, has just sat down. And the question is, do these grants cover engineering companies? The current situation has stretched our credit resources. Everything takes much longer to process the work we have. Is there anything on offer to us?
Shall I cover that?
Right. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think, again, the key mantra I say is that if you can demonstrate the impacts of the restrictions on your business. So I don't know the detail of the sector you supply to, but if you supply to businesses in the hospitality sector, for example, or a hotel, and obviously they're closed and there's a less, your projects be mothballed, there's a clear relationship between government restrictions and your turnover, and therefore we will consider your application favourably.
Thank you. I think this is another. Sorry.
Brendan, is that a legacy hand, or did you want to add to that?
Sorry, Michelle, I think that's a legacy hand. That's a new phrase on me. I beg your pardon. Sorry, no, it's not me. I beg your pardon. That was for earlier. I do apologise.
Okay, we finished that one. Right, I think this relates to listening ears questions. Another one. What if when the property does not belong to the charity and you don't pay rates directly, but we pay space hire? I'm just looking what the question was. Does that make any sense to anyone?
Yeah. So yeah, so we do have applicants. There's a large number of businesses who aren't rate payers, but they do sublet a space, and that's precisely what ARG is for. It's to recognise that a large number of businesses are not rate payers, and therefore ARG is available to them.
Absolutely, and this was Toyne's question earlier, you know, about charities, because Listening Ears is a charity. But I think I think really, I mean, what we're all saying, isn't it, that it's, you know, everyone should apply just to see if you're eligible.
Well, yeah, I think if you look at the application form, there's very clear eligibility criteria, and as long as you meet that, and this is, you know, Greenwich is fairly unique. We do have a generous scheme. Other local authorities decide not to fund home businesses, have excluded people who qualify for self-employment income support scheme. You know, we do have a generous scheme that recognises the fact that we've been in a lockdown for well over a year now, or coming up to a year. There aren't many businesses that haven't been affected. You know, and I think, you know, if you can make a good case and you can demonstrate a link between the restrictions and your turnover, if you're a going concern, if you can back up your statements, well, obviously we do have to carry out due diligence. This is public money. But you know, if you can demonstrate impact, we will look to support you. But you need to demonstrate that impact of the restrictions on your business, and you need to provide the support and evidence. And obviously, you know, we do have an anti-fraud process. We do reject a lot of grants from fraudulent applications. So please, anyone, don't get any wrong ideas. We've got very robust procedures within the council. So it's not a total free-for-all. You know, we do screen out duplicate applicants and other sorts of applications. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Now I've got a question here from Barry Kelly, Visit Greenwich. Barry's question is, how long are the grants likely to last throughout 2021? And how likely is that there will be a further funding available, especially for the visitor economy?
Gosh.
Kingsley.
Shall I? Or Michelle, do you want to say something? As Michelle's sort of in touch with the ministers on this one. Well, I think
I was going to say Brendan. I mean, I think it varies. So, I mean, obviously, what we've on one of the slides, and you will get all the presentation slides. We have, you'll be able to see, you know, obviously what's available over what period, and government have been consulting us on, you know, having end dates to some of the pots. And certainly for the Christmas scheme, initially that was due to end at the end of January, and that's been extended to the 28th of February. So in terms of that particular scheme, we've actually, the business rate team have got a lot of money out to businesses already, but there is obviously a window now to apply for that funding. Whereas, say for example, the additional restriction grant, government have given us until where are we now? So March 2022 to spend that money. But obviously we're under some pressure to get money out to businesses as quickly. So providing there's money still left, we'll continue to make those rolling payments as long as people obviously are impacted by the national restrictions until the money runs out. But it will be different things for different pots. So Brendan will come in on that.
Yeah, I'm just making sure I lower my hand first. That's okay. Yeah, the two things I was going to say is obviously with regards to the grant applications that related to business rated properties, there were various different periods, I think, without going into all the details about the tier 3 and tier 4 and the national lockdown. We took a decision to try and make it easier for businesses, and we've made a one-off payment. So we've amalgamated all those different entitlements into one payment, and we've paid in advance, in effect, up to and including the 16th of February. Which is the next time that the government will formally review the lockdown to see where we are, to see whether we remain in national lockdown or we move back to tier 3s or 4s, or that sort of scenario. So with regards to those grants, we couldn't really say a great deal as to how long they're going to last until really the 16th of February, until the government gives us some idea. And then what tends to happen is BES, the department, will then give us some guidance as to what periods of time we're going to make a payment for and how much we've been allocated. The other thing I should add, though, the Christmas support payments that were for wet-led public houses, there is a deadline for those. I think it's just been extended to the 28th of February. So if there's anyone on the chat today, on the call today, or anyone knows who's in a public house who hasn't received their £1,000 payment for Christmas support, we're going to try and do a rally round or a check round to see if we can find any stragglers who haven't applied as yet. But that closes on the 28th of February. So we'll be doing one last push. If you know anyone who hasn't applied or any other businesses who are on the group, please let them know just to make sure they've applied.
Thank you for that, Brendan. I think in a way these will be covered on the website, but I've got Warren King, photographer, has asked a question. Up to what date do these grants cover? Anyone want to do that? Kingsley?
Yeah. Well, so as Brendan mentioned earlier on, for the rating schemes, it's up to the 16th of October, and we mirror that as part of the ARG, so there shouldn't be any discrepancy on that.
16th of February.
Yeah, 16th of February, yeah, 16th of February, sorry.
February.
Yeah, thanks. I'd noticed somebody had answered that question, thanks.
Yeah,
Okay.
in terms of ARG, that I think the last payment takes us to the 13th of February. Or January, possibly.
Just to be clear, that there's not a deadline on application for that. It's just what the allocation we've received from government covers for our closed schemes. That's the allocation from government covers up to and including the 16th of February. That doesn't mean that a business can't apply for that payment after the 16th of February. Obviously, the sooner you get your application in, the sooner you would get paid. The only scheme that's technically has got a formal closure date, which means that we wouldn't be able to consider a payment after that date, is the Christmas support payment.
Thank you. Now,
Can I do a follow-up? Sorry. Oh.
Sorry?
Could I do a follow-up for Kingsley on that?
Sure.
Thank you, Graham, Greenwich World Tours. Kingsley, on the additional restrictions grants, am I right in saying, therefore, that actually, with almost a year of lockdown now, certainly those should be, we should be eligible for those going back to what? April of last year? Is that true?
No. So obviously these regimes reflect essentially the start of the tier system. So I think the earliest date for Greenwich started from the 17th of October. So that's what we call the old tier 2 scheme. But
okay,
you're not a business that's a rated property in the hospitality resale sector that wouldn't qualify. But essentially, it's basically from the first lockdown period, which was from the 4th of November to the 5th of November to 2nd of December.
Oh, I'm sorry, 7th of November? Sorry.
From the 4th of November to the 3rd of December, I believe it was, in terms of practically when the scheme,
November 4th. Good,
period.
thank you, Kingsley.
Okay.
Thank you, Graham, because I think we're all very aware that local authorities, especially the first, if you don't get your money out, you have to give it back to the government. And as Denise said at the beginning of the programme, they're very finite schemes that were working. So once they've gone, the money's gone back, then we're on to the new opportunity. Now, the joys of technology, Sandra's sent me a text to say that someone 4479 has had their hand up to ask a question.
Yes.
Now, who's 4479?
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Sorry, I've been trying to put it on the. Not very good at this. George Campion. We operate passenger boats out of Greenwich Pier.
Sorry, I didn't hear any of that. Sorry.
Campion. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Yes, I didn't actually hear what you said.
Yes, we operate passenger boats out of Greenwich Pier.
Oh. Yep.
Being moored in the middle of the river, we don't pay rates to no one, and we don't know what to do because we got an office on Greenwich Pier for selling tickets, but we don't pay rates on. We're based in the middle of the river, so how do we get on? We've literally not earned a penny since last December. Yeah.
That's you, Kingsley.
Yeah, so you're not on the ratings list, but you are a business based in the borough. You clearly have been impacted by the restrictions. Hurry up and get your application in, please.
Yeah, the registered office for the company is in Sidcup. Does it complicate things?
Sorry, I was just going to come in there. Sorry, it's Mervyn Fernandez from the business team. I work with Kingsley and Michelle. Just to say that in terms of the office that you have on Greenwich Pier, do you rent that from TfL, presumably?
Yes, but they've decided not to charge us rent.
Yeah, so that's fine. As long as you're operating within the borough, and you're operating from those commercial premises. So you just need to show some evidence that of your rental costs to support your ARG application. So as Kingsley said, do put in that application under the ARG scheme. So the fact that you've got registered offices outside of the borough doesn't prevent you from applying from the ARG scheme, as long as you've got premises also within the borough.
Yeah, it's just a small ticket office in the complex of Greenwich Pier.
So we'll base the grant level on the level of rent that you pay on an annual basis. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll be trying to type something up.
Well, 4479, I think we've answered your question.
Thank you.
So please send the email in. Say you've been here today and give your number 4479.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope I've dealt with all the questions. Yes? Yes, I have. So I'd like to wrap up now. And can I just ask everyone I'm looking at the moment, have you found this a useful meeting? Can you put your hands up, literally? Thumbs up, hands up. Lovely. I'm seeing a lot of smiling faces, hands, thumbs. I think this has been a really, really productive afternoon. And what we're going to do is the Chamber and Visit Greenwich, we're going to send a questionnaire out to everyone who's here today and all our other contacts, because what we want to do to work with Greenwich so we can find out what support you want to have in the future. And I hope when you receive this that you'll spend a little bit of time, won't be as long as the 20 minutes to fill the form in, but you'll be practiced at filling things in electronically, and then give us all the information that you can, because we want to make sure that we all have a vibrant future when the time is right. I'd like to thank Denise Scott MacDonald, who is the cabinet leader and the deputy leader of the Royal Borough of Greenwich. I think you should be a very proud woman, Denise, to have that role. And Michelle and all the team, because I think it's been a really good afternoon. So all the forms, we can send the presentations out. I think everyone knows to go to the website and have a jolly good look. You know where to, any really difficult questions, you know, send them to Kingsley. Anything you're sending in to the business support, say you've been at today's meeting, and 4479 knows what he's got to do. Okay, so I would like to thank you very much, Sandra, for taking care of us and sending me the electronic messages. Thank you. Okay, so I look forward to seeing you all soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.